Welcome to Theorycraft, a live podcast where game developers and their players engage in conversation. It's been a couple weeks again. I will say that every time it's been a couple of weeks. It's good to see you two again. It's getting cold. We are past Halloween. Did either of you two do any cool costumes?
Costumes? No. I attended Halloween with my family where there's 6 other kids costumes.
Oh, okay.
Costumes. That was fun.
So you were just super fun.
Yeah.
Did you all hit the streets, or did you do some like trunk or treat?
No, we did. We did go around their neighborhood, which was fun. When I was a kid, I felt like you couldn't even close the door because so many kids were coming to the door. But now I feel like it's so hit or miss depending on where you live. And it's still, even if you do have a lot of traffic, it's not as much as there used to be.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's your experience, Kevin, but
it is.
Yeah.
Not as much trick or treating.
You have like designated neighborhoods that are like on some app somewhere or something. I don't know.
My daughter's threatened to get me a lab coat and make me dress as Dr. Utopia.
Okay.
They were going to be the Powerpuff Girls, but it never materialized.
I'm pulling up a visual reference real quick. So, yeah. Okay.
Is it Dr. Utopium or Utonium? I can't remember the.
I'm getting nothing but Doctor Who hits right now, so you may be mixing fandoms.
Utonium.
But that's cool. That's good.
Yeah, Utonium.
Utomium, great. All you Powerpuff fans, thank you for not brigading our comments afterwards. We issued a correction immediately.
That's right.
Yeah. Have y'all been gaming?
I've been playing a lot of Marvel Snap.
Yes.
Got platinum last night. So
what's that mean? You're in the like a matchmaking ranking?
Yeah, exactly. They have the standard like bronze, silver, gold, platinum. There's actually what's interesting about this game is there's a lot of ranks, other ranks after platinum. It's like platinum, diamond, and then there's like I don't know. There's like I forget what the names of them are, but there's like 4 other additional ranks after that. So there's like a lot of ranks. So I'm curious, like, what the percentage target is for those, because I did this at Blizzard of doing the different ranks and the distribution curves. And so basically, you kind of engineer it in a way in which most players are gold, like the average player is gold. Very little players are bronze. Somewhat more players are silver. And then there's, it's like a distribution curve, kind of thing. So, and over time, you also kind of engineer the curve to constantly inflate and shift towards diamond. So it makes the players kind of feel like, the dirty secret is most players don't increase their skill level in these any type of game. You're about as good as, you're not, same thing with like IQ. You really can't increase your IQ. And so, or any kind of competence at most, skill-based things. But what you do is you inflate the season over time. And then, so you turn from gold to platinum. And that makes the player feel like, oh, I'm getting better at this game, when in reality, you're just inflating it. But anyways, So I like the kind of a sidebar random thing there. But I like the game a lot. I think the game, or the Marvel Snap as a product, has more challenges. I don't know how it's doing there. I noticed it was debuted #1 in the App Store, but I think it's diving. So I don't know, but the gameplay is great. I think there's a lot of really smart stuff they did with the game. If you think about other card games and learning from lessons there. But yeah, curious if you guys are playing it, what your thoughts are, because I have a lot of thoughts.
I haven't even downloaded it. I knew it was coming out.
I think it's
and I know
who
makes it, but yeah.
I threatened to play it at lunch, and then I didn't. I was eating lunch.
I thought you said you played it or something.
No. I said like, maybe I should bone up and just like wail the hell out by the time we do the podcast. But I did neither of those things. So I still haven't checked it out. You mentioned like a couple of innovations and lessons learned from previous card games. Like what sticks out the most to you? You don't play a ton of mobile games, do you?
I don't, no. And this is like the first, this is probably the most I've played a mobile game, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It shows you how not a mobile gamer I am. I played games like Words with Friends or Jetpack Joyride or Pokemon Go, and I played Genshin a little bit on the phone just to check it out. But I don't really play a lot of mobile games at all. And so this is the one game I tried playing it on PC and iPad, and I actually prefer it on mobile. It's just easier, and I could just play it anywhere. So I've definitely warmed up to mobile as a platform playing this game. And I think really mobile works really well with with card games. I mean, Hearthstone was a great game on mobile as well. But I think so. Some things it does well, I think, is I mean, the problem with card games or problem with Hearthstone in general is, players build a deck, they min max the game, they figured it out, and then there is a certain meta, and everyone, and then this is good, 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 trash, trash. It's like good or trash, right? Is basically what it turns into. In Hearthstone, what was the reaction to that was, God, what's it called? A tavern. The thing where like you get a deck or whatever. I forget
Yeah.
that system's called. It's been a while since I played Hearthstone, but
Tavern Brawl.
yeah, a tavern brawl, exactly. So it adds some randomness factor, or be to some other sort of rule set or something to shake it up, right? They have this like on crack. So there's like 3 locations that you play, like 3 boards essentially in a way. In each location, it's like this one board game. If you played it, it's called Land, Air, and Sea, kind of similar to that board game. So there's like 3 locations, and you kind of you have to win 2 of the locations to win. Each location has like a different affix to it. So like one is like, for example, you can't play 1 cards here, or there's another one that's like you can't, the game there's an extra turn or something like that. Like so, anyways, they all have like different like affixes to them. So basically, the game just throws a bunch of randomness factors in it, so that the player can't really build a god deck, the best meta deck, and win every game, right? Or have an advantage. So they threw out so much randomness. But I think the biggest innovation, actually, game design wise, is I don't even know if it's an innovation because I don't play so many card games. Maybe it exists somewhere else, but it's like the snap mechanic. So the snap mechanic is almost like in poker, where you just throw down, like you double down or just throw in more chips. So if you think you're winning, you throw in more chips, which you just do the snap. And then if you win, you earn more points. But if you lose more, right? So it speeds up the games, because if you snap and the opponent thinks like, oh shit, is he bluffing? Is he winning? The opponent could retreat, and if you retreat, you only take lose 1 point. But if you don't retreat and he snapped and you lost, you lose a lot. So yeah, so it does 2 things. One, it's interesting to gamble on yourself if you're winning or bluff. Right. That's interesting. The second is it speeds up the games, because if you are winning and it's snowballing, you can end it quickly, right? So yeah, the matches are really, really quick. The sessions are quick, which is kind of the trend in games. Like session lengths are getting shorter and shorter. So yeah, I don't know, but gameplay wise, the cards are interesting. I love I love Marvel heroes. I don't like the Marvel movies as much as most people do, but I like the Marvel universe, like the hero design. I like making spells and kits and stuff like that, and Marvel's like one of the kings of that. So maybe it's just kind of a me thing, but I really do like the gameplay of the game. There's some cool stuff there. On the product side, though, in terms of like monetization, the success of the game, like, is there enough market for it? I think there's, they're a venture-backed studio, just similar as Notorious, my studio. And I think the market for this game is a lot, I don't know. I feel like I would have made a different type of game as a venture-backed studio than this one. It seems like a safe game, and kind of a very saturated market. Card games, it's really hard to make a game for now. When Hearthstone came out, that was the time. But now there's like a Witcher card game. There's Legends of Runeterra at Riot, which is not doing super well. It's just a hard market, card games. But ByteDance, who is the creator of TikTok, is publishing this game, Newverse, and they are spending a shit ton of money on advertising for this. And so, but yeah, I don't know. I think the monetization also has a lot of challenges, I think, as well, in terms of like, pretty much in mobile free-to-play games, you need to have a lot of spend depth. The player needs to, you should be able to spend $10,000 in the game if you can. Like, that's kind of the upside of free-to-play. Basically, a small percentage of players pay most of the proceeds of the game traditionally. And they add a lot of, I think they're very nervous about going full bore, like full Diablo Immortal on this game. And so they tailored it back a lot, which I get it, because the Western audiences, they're very anti free to play monetization, but you pay a price with that. I think the game pales in comparison to the earnings of Diablo Immortal, let's say, for example. I don't think it's fair to really compare the two because they're, we had a chat on Theorycraft in a Discord earlier this last week, I think, about this. And it's kind of unfair to compare the two, but just in terms of the monetization model, they're way less aggressive than Immortal.
And that's, you think it's more that than it is the competition of other card games being out there, or like a lack of advertising or name recognition? You think the spend depth is maybe what's tripping them up the most?
I think so. I mean, ignoring it, so it's had a lot of installs, the game, I think, for sure. I mean, they're, again, debuted #1 in the App Store. So I don't think it's so much of like they just can't get anybody to see the game or want to download it. I think it's just, I think the spend depth is just too shallow for a game like this. And they did it for their own, just what they're comfortable with.
Right.
And whereas Diablo Immortal, I think we're pushed in a certain direction.
I think it's actually a poor strategy, because the audience isn't sophisticated to appreciate that you didn't enable whales, right? They're just going to see it as like it's either pay or it's not, and they're going to put you in one category if you're one thing and another category if you're the other thing, right? They're not going to go, oh, those really nice guys didn't make
they're not going to appreciate it. You're not going to get fan mail saying thank you for not making.
All they did, and I bet their reputation is still that it's that kind of game where you can whale out, right, and pay to win and all that stuff, right? So
I think isn't it strictly cosmetic for the most part, though? Like you just get those cool 3D and kind of like all universe portraits of characters. Like, okay.
Yeah. So in Hearthstone, right, you can buy packs, right? And you open the packs, you get cards. Yeah. This game, you cannot pay for cards directly. What you do is you pay for cosmetic upgrades to level up your cards. Like you do a frame break, which means like the image bleeds over the card, or like 3D or whatever, right? And then when you do that, you up your collector level, and your collector level every 3 levels or so, you get a new card. So you're indirectly getting cards by paying for cosmetic. And so it's a very roundabout way to gain power.
Paying for power,
So it's basically, and I've noticed some like players on YouTube and stuff like saying, oh, it's actually pay to win. You just don't notice it or something, which kind of is true. I do think it's way less pay to win than say Hearthstone was, where you just literally RNG, you get cards or you don't. And so, it's less pay to win than I think Hearthstone in a lot of ways, which is interesting. So I don't know. It was weird, interesting choices. I think the game is great. I like it better than Hearthstone, honestly, gameplay wise. But I think it's going to be a worse performing product than Hearthstone. But we'll see. We'll see. I mean, what games do now, Immortal did this, and Overwatch is probably doing this. Is just that you release with toned down monetization, and then after it gets goodwill and a lot of reviews and stuff, then you bring out the big guns. So we'll see if they do that with Snap. I haven't heard anything if they are or not, but we'll see.
Yeah, surely there are monetization updates that could be coming down the pipe once people are really sunk in and, don't want to lose all of their unlocked cosmetics and stuff like that. I mean, that feels like a pretty classic game dev move. The inertia of just being stuck on there. Yeah, it looks like they got, Diablo Immortal was, you want to talk like raw numbers in terms of penetration, advertising and stuff. I guess DI was 10 million downloads the first week, and this was 5.3. So pretty decent considering they didn't have the Blizzard nor the Diablo name behind it. Marvel is no slouch, but I think it's
a lot more saturated IP now.
Yeah, Marvel. And it's a bit more of a gamble in the gaming department.
Marvel games. It's like the Warhammer of IP.
So people are playing it. So maybe that's just it. They haven't unlocked all the sluices of krill for the whales to feed on, or I don't know. I love torturing that whale metaphor as far as possible. Cool stuff. Yeah, I just played my first game of it. Kind of an expert now. I can see myself playing a little bit more. It's fun. I love all the little quips that are popping out and all the little kind of custom animations that happen when like Iron Man goes down and he has an ability that modifies the thing on the board, and then there's a little Iron Man looking thing that happens around the power number. Like if there's that level of bespoke visual treatment on every single hero card that comes out, I can see that being a real treat to play. I love stuff like that. That feels like some Blizzard polish that they probably brought with them, That stuff reeks of...
all the card art is fantastic. It feels very nostalgic to me.
Yeah, you're a big X-Men cartoon guy, right? I think I forgot about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nostalgia thing, like the 90s
Mhm.
cartoon I grew up with. And I think it was very well produced and well written. And I don't know, but it's hard for me to say because I just grew up with it. But I think objectively, I mean, Marvel is obviously one of the top IPs in the world right now. So
Where are you? Where are you fitting these games into? They're like 5 minutes long, so that's not a big ask. But I'm just curious because you don't ride the bus. So what's your snap time?
yeah, I mean, just like kind of, when I'm winding down for the night, which, I don't recommend playing games right before you go to bed or your phone
Yeah.
before bed, but usually I'll play like an hour of it or something.
Mm.
Or I just spend a lot of time in NorCal with my family and with screaming kids. So I just put my earbuds on and just played a bunch of snaps. So yeah, I don't know. I just play it like any other game, honestly. I think that is one thing I think we need to pierce through as boomer gamers is just like thinking about mobile as just like potty time or on a bus kind of gaming when it could also just be full-fledged like a gaming experience on your phone.
Easy for you to say. Your eyes aren't going bad.
Yeah. Well, they make these huge ass phones though, Kev. So
Okay, good.
yeah.
Do they have the big giant blocky numbers for dialing?
Yeah.
That kind of fun.
But anyways, we should get to the main topic. I don't want to eat up all the
Sure.
time on Snap.
Yeah, we can go. So Dark and Darker just had another banner run of what did they open it for like another bit of a closed beta, and now the gates are shut again is what happened. I don't know. Kevin's brought up Tarkov a handful of times on the podcast before, and Chris, I mean, I know you have too, and you have strong opinions here. I've never really gone super into this genre. It feels a little too technical and skill-based for somebody my age, and but I'm so curious because as like a lay person on the outside of it, I'm aware of the Tarkov fan base and friends I meet that play it, and it's like the only thing they fucking play, and they talk about it as if it's just like the richest game experience they've ever had, and they don't want to let it go. And now it's starting to feel like AAA developers are beginning to catch on with snatching bits of the genre, and I just think it'd be really interesting to discuss what are AAA devs maybe thinking to take from Tarkov, what's Dark and Darker taking specifically, and like, where you think it's going. Do y'all think there's sort of like a big zeitgeist Fortnite style wave coming with this genre down the line, or is it not accessible enough, So maybe we can just talk about Dark and Darker first. I know you both have been
I know
playing
Kevin
it a bunch.
played it a lot, so I'd love to hear Kevin's thoughts. Like, Kevin, why do you think? Because I noticed the numbers over the weekend. Like, it got like 25K concurrent on
there was like
daily
over
active user or so.
Made.
Yeah. So why do you think it's resonating? It has zero marketing. It's a tiny indie studio.
Right.
What's going on? What do you think?
The Tarkovs in general, like not specific to Dark and Darker, but we can delve more deeply into why Dark and Darker over other games. Because Marauders is another version that came out, and I don't know if it's doing as well. What's most fascinating to me is if we learned anything from Ultima Online way back, and I apologize because this is an old game, but if the industry learned anything from Ultima Online, it's that you can't do non-consensual PvP anymore, and you can't do full loot anymore, right? Like full loot PvP. And so we took those two lessons with us. And I was one of the people that was kicking and screaming, saying, no, you absolutely can and should do these things. But everyone else was like, no, that's ridiculous. And so what you're seeing now, over 20 years later, is this game comes out called Escape from Tarkov, and it has both of those elements. And that's creating like where people are seeing the power of those two elements in the gameplay experience and the engagement level. And also one of the key things is the connectivity between sessions, right? Like when you play your typical battle royale, it's just grind, try to win, and then start from scratch, do it all over again. But without like ranking progression or anything like that, there's nothing about the two different sessions that are related or connected at all. And in these games, there's a massive connection because the gear you take out, you can use in the next one. If you lose all your gear, you can't take it into the next one. So there's a big picture connectivity that I think is really meaningful to a lot of players. And there's also just a hunger for games that have non-consensual PvP and full loot, games where the consequences are dire, and I think that's what we're seeing. So, to me, it's just fascinating that we've come full circle on this stuff. And so now a lot of games are trying to capitalize on that feeling, that sense of engagement that really deep connection with the experience.
Yeah, and where do you think it kind of this reaction, this kind of surge of some of these gameplay elements started, like the reemergence of it?
Well, it could just be, the pendulum swinging the other way, because for so long, so many games protected you in so many ways. Like you could never be irritated unless you opted in ahead of time. Like, okay, I'm going to push this button, enter this queue, and I know for the next 10 minutes I might be irritated, but I'm ready for it, And that sort of evens out like the emotional, hills and valleys of a long gaming experience. And in particular designs also, again, the like irritation levels have been reduced across the board, even in like non-PvP environments, like with our loot tables and the way we drop loot. You have token systems instead of random loot. You have personal loot instead of group loot. Like there's all these little ways that people have tried to eliminate irritation. And over time, I feel people you get sort of the emotional experience gets so stable that you start to hunger for something that's going to throw a curveball at you. And that's what these games have done.
Mm-hmm.
They've gone completely the other way. And people are just like, oh my God, the worst possible thing just happened to me. I died. I had no idea what was happening. I lost all my stuff. I can't wait to run it back. I can't wait to play it again. Right. Because it was so emotional and so crazy. And then you realize, wow, something good can happen. Like I can learn and I can be the guy that just did that thing to me, doing that to somebody else, right? And there's just a lot of people that are in that. I think it's a lot of people in that sort of space.
Yeah. It sounds so sorry. Go ahead.
Right, go ahead, Luca. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I'm just trying to draw comparisons here because, again, I've never really spent a lot of time playing competitive first-person shooters, but I used to play Dota really heavily for a few years and League, and then some HOTS. The slow kind of watering down or putting up the bumpers that you're describing, like you're talking specifically within the competitive FPS space, it sounds like, because... Okay, so those people were really craving some more friction because this sounds kind of like the reverse journey that I made going from playing Dota to eventually playing a HOT session that was less than half the length of a Dota 2 game, had a far smaller burden of knowledge, on the player. And I would leave even games where I got completely stomped, not really feeling particularly bad. Like the experiences were always kind of mid. And that's nice sometimes, but I do remember just how fucking good it felt to, overcome something that took 50 minutes and could very well have gone the other way. And I don't know, I guess I'm just trying to draw like an analogy here.
Right. There's also rats, in Tarkov. They call them rats, people that are avoiding all conflict. They hear gunfire, fire, and they run the other way. Some run towards it and other people run the other way. They're trying to collect as much loot and get out without ever being seen, right? So
yeah, that would be me. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's interesting too, because this is a thing that will ebb and flow. Because I play with a group that's more on the rat side. Like we're older guys. We're not the best FPSers. We're not hardcore in the sense of having a lot of time, to always be collecting and bringing in the best gear, know the game inside and out, So a lot of times conflict happens and we just panic and run around and shoot each other and half the time and, we lose, right? And there's over time, there's like this sense of exhaustion that happens because you're in that sort of fight or flight, literal panic sort of state. And then, like you play it for a week and then one of your buddies will finally be brave enough to say, can we just chill and play a nice fun game tonight, kind of thing.
Yes. That was WoW for us back in the day. Yeah, we would say can't lose at WoW. Just switch off of Dota and just go farm some stuff peacefully. Yeah.
Yeah. So I do think there's a back and forth, and I think one of the reasons that Tarkov is so successful, in sort of the same analogous to why Dark Souls was so successful when it came out, is because there's just an absence of what it offered. Like games are too easy, and then Dark Souls hit, massive challenge. Everyone's like, "Oh my god, what is this?" A ton of Dark Souls games start coming out, right? Or challenge games, and then this one is just like all the irritation and potential losses removed. Throw out Tarkov, and it's just like now people are like, "Yay!" And so it caught on, but this pendulum will swing back and forth. Like people will get exhausted, and I think like the need for like just kind of fun experiences that make you feel good, and that will come back as well. So
I mean, it strikes me that AAA developers have thus far been kind of afraid to really go into this territory too. I mean, severe penalties mean people get pissed off and then they just quit the game. When you've got like all the telemetry, you're trying to avoid any points of like, oh, there's a 5% drop off in players as soon as they get to the first X. And the more of those you can iron out, it's almost like, well, that must be the route to making a better game, as a game that retains more people, which is kind of a roundabout way to make a design decision.
Yeah. Well, Call of Duty is putting out a Tarkov. Call of Duty's the new Call of Duty is planning. I can't remember what they call it, but it has a version of Tarkov coming soon. So
that's interesting. So they're like beginning to test the waters by bolting on.
You pull out a couple of pieces to the Jenga, and it's not Tarkov anymore, and they'll advertise it as Tarkov, but we'll see if they actually do it or not.
That's exactly how I describe it. It's like a Jenga, and if you pull out too many pieces, it's not Tarkovian.
Right.
I think the Call of Duty one's more extraction game mode than actual like kind of Tarkov-ish, which of course Tarkov is not just extraction, it's also like the world feels dangerous. There's it's very about the economy and a bunch of other things. But so it'll be interesting to kind of see. And that's to answer your question, Luca, the reason why AAA doesn't really delve in these kind of things unless it's proven by somebody else, like there's a reason why there wasn't like a PUBG that comes out of AAA, because they'll look at it and go, wait, hold on, the player dies and then they die? Like they don't instantly respawn with all their stuff back and then get bonuses? Well, I don't know. How will that work? Like, and so that's why indies do these things. They come out of indies because it's hard to like sell experiences like that in AAA when it's so risk adverse,
Sell them to the people who greenlight the production is what you're saying, because there's a fear that dying means players will get pissed off and stop. Because obviously nobody gets pissed off and stops playing Overwatch 2, right? Like that doesn't happen.
Like there's some lore, I probably shouldn't say this, but there is some lore about how Apex Legends even got greenlit and released. So EA, when they looked at the game, and they have like a conference room of quote unquote experts, right, to know if a game's going to be good or not or make money. They said Apex is going to be a flop. We are not going to support it with any marketing. And that's why it didn't have any marketing. It just came out one day. And so Respawn was like, well, we believe in the game. We think it's going to do great. We're just going to release it. And so they did. They had no marketing budget. I think they may have paid a few influencers some money. And of course, now Apex is like their top performing product at EA. So much so they made Vince, the head of Respawn, now the head of making decisions at EA on which games they greenlight. Because ultimately, the larger AAA studios don't know what's going to do well or not, and this is the problem of game development and the pipeline is knowing what games are going to resonate with an audience and have what they call in business like product market fit, right? That is the king of the business, and it's so hard to do. And I think internally in studios, they don't know which games are good. Huge publishers don't know. And that's why so many of the biggest hits in the last 5 years or so are indie games. Like if you think about Valheim or Among Us or Dark and Darker now, there's a reason, because everything else just feels saturated, or like how many more arena shooters and MOBAs do we need? Yeah, so I think we're seeing a huge shift in the industry towards, newer experiences and things like that. So, So, anyways,
after they're proven out,
but it's still it's still a small percentage, right? Like if you look at the number of people playing games, look at Dark Souls, like how many people. That's why beating Dark Souls still has credibility, right? Like, oh, you're a real gamer, because it's like not everyone can do that. And there's still way more people that are like, I don't want to play Dark Souls. Like talking about fighting a boss for 3 hours and then not beating it and making zero progress. Like that sounds like the opposite of fun after they get off from a long day of work or whatever and the kids are in bed, So there's probably still way more people that think Dark Souls isn't for them and are not interested in that kind of experience than there are that think it's amazing and love it, right? So despite all its accolades, I still put it sort of in the relatively small percentage of total gamers.
Yeah. I mean, I felt that way pre-Elden Ring, and now I feel like, I don't know, if I wanted to go back and play one of those, I would know what to expect and know that I could probably overcome it, I just didn't know I had
Elden Ring was more approachable for sure. Like they softened it to get more of that audience. And now that they've gotten more of that audience, they're probably never going back. like we're going to say Elden Ring 2 before we see Dark Souls 4.
Yeah, I think that's basically.
And I
the
think that's sad.
mainstream
That actually
assumption.
saddens me, because I'm like, because I sort of bounced off Elden Ring because I was like, yeah, there's parts in that game that are amazing, but there's also quite a bit in there that's
Yeah.
for a different audience than
You
I.
have to appreciate, though, they did make a new IP for it. They made a whole new
No, I do
category.
appreciate that.
They didn't do Dark Souls 4 and do that,
For
right?
sure.
Because
Yeah.
other game companies would have done that. Because
Yeah,
they'd be like,
and-
why
and
aren't
I
we
don't-
capitalizing on Dark Souls name? We should make
Right.
Dark Souls 4, right? Like, and so I do appreciate that they realize
Yeah.
the core experience is going to be a bit different and to do a new IP. So
And I can't blame them for the direction change. I can't, like that's why I say I'm sad, but I'm not mad at them for like being like, yeah, this is the new direction, Elden Ring. Because I can't be, like of course it is. You're getting way more people playing your game. So
yeah. And even Elden Ring, strikes a good balance of the open world is more accessible. But then when you go into dungeons, I agree, like the Dark Souls is actually more challenging. But it has both of those two elements in the game.
Yeah.
It's not totally a game for babies or anything like that.
Right.
So
For
I think that was
Thank you,
a
Chris.
smart design. This is my Chris lingo, yeah. But yeah. So, anyways, to bring it back to Tarkovlikes and that sort of thing, we were talking about where it all started. I think some of it started with the survival genre. I think the survival genre was a reaction to everything feeling. I think at the peak in terms of accessibility was that one Prince of Persia. Anytime you would die, you just got picked up and just put back where you were.
Right.
And like every game became hyper accessible to reach like this broader audience. And then just all of the experiences just felt really just, blah, And so I think the survival genre, roguelikes, the surge of those, Dark Souls, of course, and now Tarkov is really proving that, there's a market for lossy, as they call them, type of experiences. And it was interesting. I was having a conversation with an investor actually about the Tarkov genre. Like, well, what, and about kind of dark and stuff. Like, well, would like a sword and sorcery kind of Tarkov ever work? And I'm like, you ever hear of Ultima Online?
Right.
So I thought that. So, anyways, the history of this goes back, pretty far, and it just kind of shows you really great experiences never die.
And you also see you see the same sort of general trend in survival games, right? Like they used to be pretty hardcore, and then they softened over time steadily, to make them more accessible. And now it's like if you're chopping down a tree in a game, you're a survival, and it's like you're not a survival game, right? Like V Rising is not a survival game, but it's labeled as such, and a lot of people might think it is, but it's like you can literally sit there and for your blood to run out and your castle to decay, like you have to kind of be online forever, just sitting there doing nothing before you actually die, right? Like that's it's not a very aggressive like loss condition. So I don't feel like it's a survival game. It's a great game. Like it's doing a lot of really fun things and I enjoy the game a lot, but survive? I don't know. Like,
yeah, and the one thing survival does gain you is like a lot of replayability. And I think V Rising does have replayability, but doesn't seem to have the same kind of like long form lifespan as like Rust does or other survival games. So it is interesting. But yeah, Kevin. So to bring it back to Dark and Darker, like what are some elements that you think are special? We were having a conversation on Discord about this, but yeah, if you want to share any kind of other thoughts about the game, what you think they do really well.
So compared to like some of the other games that have come out, one of the big things again is challenge. Like when you walk in and you fight your first skeleton, there's definitely no guarantee you're going to win. Like if you mess up, it's punishing, and that's the first monster, and so it's very dangerous. That's something that the cycle failed at, in my opinion. The mobs are ridiculously easy to kill, like the PvE elements. Other players, of course, are a mixed bag, but in terms of like the world being dangerous, it's not very dangerous. Dark and Darker is very, very dangerous. And because healing is in such limited supply a lot of times, getting hurt matters a lot for your long-term survivability. So every mistake you make, you feel. And that already sets the tone for a very gripping experience because you have to be fully kind of engaged. from the moment you start till the moment you escape. And that's where you want it to be. Professional streamers, right? Like they get to a point where everything's a joke, but most of us that live in the real world, right? I think the game excels because of that sort of engagement and that tension that's just always there. It's always right there. And Marauders was kind of in between. I didn't play a lot of Marauders. It still felt like it needed more time to cook. Obviously Dark and Darker does too, but I ran through Marauders a few times and I was escaping way too much early on. Whereas in Dark and Darker and Tarkov, when I remember back to my Tarkov experience, it took me several sessions before I was even close to getting out, and I feel like that's a good metric where it's like you have to earn even that first victory. So
that's good.
I think that's one of the things that Dark and Darker is doing well over some of its more recent competitors.
Do you think anything from like the fantasy genre or that sort of thing adds to the experience in the game?
I do. It feels very different. It feels more like the audience can be broader because strategy matters so much. How are we going to deal with this encounter? Most of the time, like in Tarkov, it's like a lot of times it's over before you've even had a chance to like think, how are we going to solve this? Right? Because the guy just shoots you in the head, or you shoot him in the head with a flick shot. But in the fantasy thing, it's like, okay, there's players. Let's figure out what they have. Do they have a mage? Do they have a hunter? Do they have a warrior? Right? Now let's figure out, are we going to push this? Are we going to wait? Are we going to go through the door? Are we going to set traps? And, are we going to try to maneuver so we're on the good side of the white wall that's pushing them? Or are we going to try to just run and escape? Like, there's a lot of strategic time there for you to decide, which engages a totally different skill set amongst players. And I think that comes from the mix of ranged and melee, because the whole thing, also the movement speed is pretty slow and swing times are pretty slow. So you usually see the enemy and then you have a little bit of time to figure out how you're going to handle this encounter. And that's both in PvE and PvP. Obviously, rogues still jump out every once in a while and you have to react instantly. But I think that does a lot in terms of allowing more people to be good at the game. Because like if you're not the best at clicking heads, you can still be very strategically sound, make good decisions, and that can lead to good outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a benefit of, like the fantasy thing. Also, just fantasy is, as anyone who's looked at market research, is just way more popular than both sci-fi and modern and horror and Western.
Realism,
so fantasy is just like ridiculously popular. So
I should have played this fucking game.
And I always thought, one of the challenges of doing some kind of Tarkov experience is just if it's melee, in Tarkov, the world feels dangerous because at any angle you could be sniped, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I always thought, how are they going to, one of the challenges there is how do you do that in a fantasy setting? And, basically their answer is just like a dungeon, like close quartered combat.
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of
corners,
darkness aspect and all of that.
Yeah,
so
the darkness.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting element.
And rogues, the fact that there are rogues that can jump out at any moment.
Exactly. Yeah, the stealth kind of situation. Yeah, for sure. And if you think about it, like, why did Stranglethorn Vale feel scary? Well, it's rogues,
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot there. I really think this genre is the next big game will come out of this kind of rule set, I think. And it's interesting to see. There's going to be a lot of shots on goal in this genre, I think. And it'll be interesting to see how it evolves and moves forward over time, like who's going to be the apex of this genre or whatever.
Yeah, and if it breaks into the big time, like, because again, it's like there's a whole population of people, I think, that have heard that Tarkov is the game to play, but have gotten in and been like, holy shit, no way. Right? Or looked at it and been like,
oh yeah.
Not for me,
But
once it's like a Call of Duty,
a cliff, yeah.
Once it's like Call of Duty or, some big studio puts out a beautiful looking game that plays well and is smooth and animations and everything are amazing. Like whether or not that will bridge the gap and everyone will be like, oh wow, I can't believe it. I'm being turned into a core gamer,
Yeah. So like Blizzard used to do this, that's their whole thing.
Yeah.
Someone needs to Yeah, somebody needs to pull this genre in and find just the perfect way to soften it and then add a ton of polish. And
without pulling out too many. That last
yes,
Jenga.
the Jenga tower. I mean, I don't know. No one has to like spill any beans here, but if there is a thing that you feel like could be tweaked for accessibility's sake without necessarily, perverting the genre, where would you go?
Oof. I'm such a purist. Like, I don't want it to become more accessible, honestly. Like,
yeah,
because I love that Tarkov can make so much money. Like they have made a ridiculous amount of money,
but could it make more money? You know what I mean?
Right. And that's always the question from a studio, right? And it's like, and that's how we get into trouble, like we get greedy and it starts ruining games, so it's like, oh.
Yeah, I agree with you, Kevin. But, if you think about WoW, right? Like WoW took a lot of the MMO, EverQuest sort of things, and they did broaden it to a larger audience by doing surgical things like the death penalty
and UI. Like there are definitely things where it's like, I have buttons on my screen instead of slash commands, right? Like, and there's still so there's still a ton that can be done. Like Dark and Darker, you can't remap your keys, right? And like the spellcasting system is pretty rough, right? So
so we do have like around 10 minutes, and we can go over a little bit if people have thoughts or want to share. I know there's some Tarkovian fans in the audience, so let's bring up Harry.
Yep. What's up,
Hi,
Harry?
How's it going?
Good.
Piggybacking off what you guys were just saying, it feels like kind of a philosophical question to me. Do you aim to please a lot of people with your game design, or do you aim for a very specific demographic? And I apologize if that's a kind of a uninformed question, but you know what I mean? It's like, do you want to please as many people as possible, but do you think of a specific type of player when you're designing your game, or do you think of no one in particular and just the general concept of fun?
Yeah, I can go first, I guess. I think it depends, I think. Certainly there are many games that are made. Games are kind of an art form, so I mean they are. And so you don't necessarily make art for a certain audience all the time. You kind of just make it because you think the creator thinks it's novel or experience that they feel needs to be made. And then the audiences are created off that. And then over time, they're like, oh, well, there's an audience for this kind of genre. That's how like new genres are born, is not because they're chasing a certain market or certain demographic, because that demographic doesn't exist. You're 0 to 1, right? So that certainly is part of game development process or any art form sort of thing. Second, but it depends. Like if you're an established studio, or if you're kind of like a venture-backed studio like ours, you do have to kind of tell the story about what market, who is this player that you're making this game for. Like there needs to be some, before you get like publishing or any kind of like deal, you have to kind of tell a story about like, what market this is looking to attract. It could be like a new market, or it could be like an emerging one or something like that. But you still have to kind of tell that story. I do think it's important as game designers to make something for a specific audience rather than trying to make something for everybody. If you make something for everybody, it's nothing for anybody. I kind of think, because you dilute it too much. You need to have like a specific experience you're trying to deliver. Stay true to that. I think over time, as the product matures, maybe people churn out or that sort of thing. And so you're like, oh, well, we need to broaden the audience and just make it something for everybody. But then you lose your other audience who came to it for something specific. If you make Coke and then now you're changed Coke to make it diet for everybody, that's not good. You should just make another product for someone different. We were just talking about Elden Ring and Dark Souls. Well, they didn't change Dark Souls to be Elden Ring. They made another game. They made another IP, Elden Ring, right? So I think that's also important.
Yeah. And Elder Scrolls, has done the exact opposite. And they'll just reinvent their entire, not the core of their game, the gameplay loop, but they'll reinvent a lot of the systems and design that goes into their game. And they end up losing, like there's elitists in every iteration of the franchise, in Morrowind and Oblivion and in Skyrim. And it's very interesting. It has grown in popularity, but I don't think there's maybe an objectively correct way to go about it, because then it's just, I guess it's what your priorities are. It's really if you prioritize the money or the game, but at the same time, it's not like they're not putting heart into their game.
Well, this is from a game designer's perspective too. I feel like if you're trying to justify the decision from, being the head of a company, there are a lot of different approaches. Like you want to deliver a game to an audience, that hasn't changed, but you need to be much more concerned about the size of the audience, or if the audience is small, whether you're running like lean enough to make money off of farming that entire audience, or if your monetization model needs to be different to compensate for the small audience. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you could do it. It sounds like, because Kevin was talking about, Tarkov has obviously been very, very successful. And I think it's just a box price, right? They don't sell anything else. Yeah. Right. So, that works for them. They're probably just kind of right-sized or even, way undersized for the success they've experienced. But for a company the size of, Blizzard to wade in and decide that they wanted to make something in that space, they would need a bigger audience, or else it would need to be like pumped to the gills with ways to get additional spend. Spend depth. I wish I hadn't learned that term. It's so gross. Thank you, Chris.
I was reading that in the Discord earlier.
How the whales are cut, and I don't want to know about spend depth.
Seriously.
Yeah. So for me to answer the question just pretty quickly is, and this will expose my ego a little bit, but I do make a game for a specific audience, and that audience is me. I just want to make a game that I want to play, and I assume, again, arrogantly, that if I like it, everyone else will like it, right? Now, within that structure, obviously, you end up working on a team, and the team represents a variety of different kinds of gamers, and even I personally can put on different kinds of players' hats to feel like, well, how would they like it, and how would this treat them, and is this game for them or not? But at the end of the day, I rarely will willingly make a decision that will make more money or bring more people in to spend more money if it's making a change to the game that I don't like. So that's how, again, that's the sort of very specific game design approach, right? And that's why I don't own my own company, and I don't, have to talk to venture capitalists, right? Because I would never get funding. But that's my approach once I get down to making a thing.
Yeah, but I still think there's a way to make a lot of money, be widely successful, build a giant studio without, doing predatory months or something is a bad experience. WoW is a perfect example of that.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So
there are so many WoWs. Yeah. It's just build a WoW, no problem.
Yeah.
For sure. But I mean, but
you need a bit of both, right?
I know what you mean.
You need some market sense, you need some business sense for sure, but you also need people that are just passionately driven to make awesome things, and they know what they're doing. And, sadly, some of the formula has become exposed in terms of making money. I think a lot of the mobile industry has capitalized on addiction mechanics and, things like that, we might consider or turn our nose up at, this is not a great game. It's ridiculous that it makes this much money or whatever. But yeah, when it comes to, to me, honest game design, I approach it from a pretty specific angle. I just wanted this awesome thing to play.
Cool. I mean, unless there's another question in the audience, maybe we could.
Oh, you want to just tie it up? Yeah, sure. 6:50.
Whenever you guys are ready.
No, I'm good.
This is a good topic, though. I think we're going to see more games in this genre and this kind of experience come out, and it would be fun.
I would say there's one interesting anecdote I have regarding what we were talking about, too, that I would add.
Let's do it.
It was the percentage of people playing that are on the team playing the game at night. I would say most games, or I get the feeling that most games at most studios, that percentage is actually pretty low. I think 20% is would be considered a good percentage of the team actually going home and playing the game at night. And that's team wide, right? Not just designers, but artists and programmers and everything else. I feel for WoW, it was extremely high. There were just a ton of people going home and playing it at night. We work on it all day and we go and play it at night,
that was one of them.
And that was, and obviously we're both designers, so it's kind of part of our job. It's sort of a necessity, but we were always getting
yeah,
artists in
yeah.
our office the next day, or programmers or producers just like complaining about something, or they were just across the team. We had a lot of people just going on and playing the game. And then when I went to Obsidian, we were working on a game that was very Obsidian-like, which was Armored Warfare. It was a tank game, tanks type game, which is very different than what they usually make. And, you know, the project was sort of taken to keep the studio afloat, and it was generating income and that kind of thing. But I felt like 5% tops were going home and playing the game, you know, at night. And it was just like, what a difference, right? Like, what a difference in individual execution on like your day to day, and because of the passion involved in what you're making,
yeah,
right? And just like just general feeling, general morale, and general excitement, and all that. So it's just an interesting metric when you're making something, I think.
Good shit. So we're all going to go roll on some New World Fresh servers now. They just came out today.
Nice.
And yeah, so I will see you all there. I'll be chopping trees for the next 200 hours.
Survival
Are you
Blades.
actually going to do that?
I think I will make a character. I've been talking about it so much, and I have a friend I said I was going to. I'm going to do it. It's like, I don't know. When he asked if I had done it yet, I was like, well, I just figured I hadn't yet because like playing New World won't solve my problems. But like that's an excuse I could use to never game. So I think I'm just going to fucking bang on it tonight. And we'll see how it is. I wonder if the queues are like absolutely horrid, because I know that a lot of streamers, like Asmon, is getting sponsored to do drops and stuff. So maybe they're all gummed up. But we'll check it out.
Server he's on and go somewhere else, man.
Yeah, but then that'll be like dead in 2 weeks. You know how it goes. So that's the way of things. But yeah, this was fun. This is a really good, meaty topic. So we'll see y'all pretty soon. Thanks, everybody, for listening in and asking questions. And Chris, why don't you take us out?
Oh, yeah. Until next time. Later, gamers.